Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm from the Hope for a Better Marriage community on Patreon and Facebook. It is a group for married women who are looking for support in their marriage and they're looking for a way to transform themselves in their marriage without necessarily forcing their husband to go to therapy or read a book, do a workbook with them. So, there is hope even if your husband isn't at the place where he wants to actively work on the marriage alongside you. I want to talk about how to navigate if you are currently working full time, part time, and your desire is to work less or be home full time with your kids. And if your husband isn't fully supportive, or even if you're unsure about if you want that, how to go about that, this video is for you. This video is not like the financial budget aspect, it's not an MLM. It's not a get rich quick scheme, none of that. It's more about how to lay the foundation in your marriage and honestly just in your life to facilitate working towards making that transformation and having your husband be more supportive and more on board with eventually making that change in your marriage. And even if your husband isn't or doesn't get to the point where he's supportive, how can you learn to be happier, content, what can help you to continue working, being a mom, being a wife, how to find more balance and peace in your current circumstances. But I am hoping that long-term plan, your husband can come on board and be supportive with you, at least working less if that is your desire. All right. So, kind of diving in first, I'm going to give you a little bit of my background just so you can understand where I'm coming from. Your situation is going to be different, and it doesn't mean that what I'm going to share doesn't apply to you. A lot of this is general principles that can help your life and marriage. But I'm giving my specifics so you can understand that I have been through this, I'm on the other side of this, and also some of the specifics that were helpful in my situation. All right, so I started out my marriage working full time. Prior to marriage, my husband and I had the vision that I would eventually either work less or maybe not at all and be home with our kids. So my husband was aware that that's something I desired, and he was supportive, I think, as long as it was financially feasible. And we moved and lived in a high cost living area, so that didn't seem, once we were married and started having kids, the dream kind of seemed a little bit unattainable. But he was aware of that desire. I grew up with a stay at home mom, but then I went to college and got a degree that I wanted to use. It was nutrition, I was passionate about it. And then my husband grew up with a full time working mom. So it wasn't really like something that he desired. He didn't necessarily need a stay at home traditional wife who never worked. But he did want someone who would prioritize the family over a career. So we were kind of similar in that sense. So that, again, might be different than you, but all hope is not lost if that's your situation. What I'm going to share is still going to be helpful for you in your situation. And things changed. Because when I got married and started having kids, I actually realized, like, oh, being home with kids is actually really overwhelming and challenging. I actually like working. I don't want to be home full time. Maybe I'm just going to keep working part time. I started working part time after my second was born. I'm going to keep working part time to pay for private school instead of homeschooling. So I quickly shifted. And then the reality, my husband's career options weren't quite making as much money as we would have needed to support our family in a high cost of living area. So there was even times when he wondered if he should be the stay-at-home dad, because he actually is really good with our kids and he's really good at cooking, cleaning, all that stuff. And I'd become a WIC degree nutritionist, became an IBCLC, lactation consultant. I could have gotten a job in the hospital. I could have made enough to support us, at least a simple life. But I knew I'd be the nighttime parent when we were going to have more kids. And I knew I would be very resentful. And personally, I was just struggling with stuff. And I just knew that wasn't going to work best for our family. So I'm glad I didn't do that. So I continued working part time. And he was working full time, trying to figure out career options that could support us. But I had not read The Empowered Wife or The Surrendered Wife, and I didn't quite have the best skills to navigate that. And I'm going to talk about how I was not motivating my husband to really want to step up and take the plunge to really be the sole provider. So there is a process. It's not just a quick fix. It's not just like you utter this phrase and your husband, or it's not like you're like putting a financial plan together. You know, you're not like approaching this like a lawyer with your defense. It's different. So, step one is so important, and it is actually to learn how to be happy, grateful, and content with your life, your circumstances as a working mom. To stop being like, oh, my life would be better if I was a stay at home mom, or, this just like, just dwelling on what you're missing out with your kids, but it's learning how to embrace your current circumstances. That's actually really important. It's not like you are ignoring your desires to want to be home, but in all things in life, whatever challenges we're going to, we do need to learn how in the moment, how can I best handle this in the moment? How can I learn to still find some joy? How can I take care of myself? Because at the time, so I was working part-time. I worked full-time through my first pregnancy, dropped to 4 days after my first was born. Then when she was almost 2, our second was born, and I dropped to, I think, 2 days a week. My husband and I would alternate our working days to be home with the kids, and then we had family members who would help. But yeah, thankfully he was supportive, and I was able to. And part of it was the amount we would pay for childcare I wouldn't make much money. So did it make sense? Okay, so that's where I was, and then I got pregnant with my third when my oldest was in 2020. So my oldest, I think, was about 6. So here I am, pregnant with my third. 2020, COVID, all that stuff is happening. And I was definitely more successful at work. I was literally only working part-time, still one employee of the year. While inside, I feel like I'm just like drowning. And I felt so unsuccessful as a mother, as a homemaker, partly because I wasn't there full time. It was hard. I was placing my happiness on my husband. I was looking at him to make sure my needs were met. I wasn't taking responsibility for my own happiness, my own needs. And I just looked at him for a lot of the reasons why I wasn't happy. And that did not motivate him to try to contribute to my happiness, because he would try and then I would just be more negative or critical. He wasn't speaking my love language, all those things. And yeah, I wasn't prioritizing my own well-being and figuring out in my current life circumstances, how can I take care of myself well, in the increments of time that I have as a mom with 2 young kids, pregnant, working part-time. Okay, so I started a book club to read The Surrendered Wife by Laura Doyle, June 2020. So I was already I think 3-4 months pregnant at that point, maybe 5. And The Surrendered Wife is just the original version of The Empowered Wife. I don't know why I chose that. I now wish I had chosen The Empowered Wife because it's better organized, but whatever. It still has the same intimacy skills, which are what I needed, which were the key that I had been looking for, because I remember me and my husband would have the same conflicts, same struggles, and I'd just be like, I need answers. Hey, this book actually had the answers, laid it out very well. It was like, wow, this is what I've been looking for. So I read it with a group of women virtually. We did a Zoom every week, and that was so wonderful. Especially I was in the transition, pregnant with my third. Life starts to get a little bit more challenging when you just have lots of young kids around you. So, and I was trying to balance work. So what that helped me to learn is the first skill is self-care. So I realized I was responsible for figuring out what I needed, because my husband doesn't know what I need. He doesn't know. He can try to figure it out, but he doesn't know what I truly need to feel restored, to be able to experience more joy, more peace, to show up better for my family, to handle the stress of life better. So I also learned that I was not a victim to my circumstances. I could be empowered. I could figure out what I need. How can I figure this out? And yes, I might occasionally express it to my husband. I would love to take a nap, which was way better than when I would just complain or yell at him. I need to sleep. I learned how to approach things better. And I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of all the skills. I have other videos. I talk about this. I lead book clubs on my Patreon, but I do suggest that book. It was throughout this talk, you're going to see how that really helped me to lay this framework. So, I learned another important thing she talks about is the importance of gratitude. And that's actually one of the later skills, but I don't think you need to wait on that necessarily. Learning to cultivate a more positive, grateful mind, again, versus thinking of how I'm the victim of my circumstances, getting into negative thought spirals. So, like in the past, I would have a rough night with my kid and then be like, oh, the rest of the day is going to be terrible. How am I going to get through? But now I'm like, okay, I know I can get through this. It might be hard, but what can I do to make my day easier? Where can I get a nap? I'm empowered. I figure out how can I handle this? And I personally, prayer does come into that for me as well. So I learned to focus on gratitude for what my husband was doing, how he was showing up through acts of service, just being grateful, more grateful for him in general. And my perspective on him started to shift. And I know I wasn't pregnant. I mean, I wasn't perfect because I was pregnant and I was new to this, but he did start to see a difference in me. I was more positive. I was easier to be around. He wanted to spend more time with me, and I wasn't constantly complaining about being home with the kids and how overwhelming and difficult it was. I started to send him pictures of me having fun with the kids and how much I enjoyed being home with the kids and being grateful that I got that time. Those days of the week when I wasn't working, I was grateful. And I'm sure, again, there are still hard days. It's still overwhelming at times. But my overall thought loop in my head started to turn. I would learn to stop and change when I got into those negative thought spirals, and especially be like, okay, I'm probably tired. I'm probably hungry. I maybe need some socialization. I need some sunshine, fresh air. Kids need that too. All those things, kids affect their behavior too. So, like, let's go for a walk. We live near our church. We could go for a walk, go to the prayer garden. That was great. I learned, yeah, how to be empowered basically. And so in the past, like I talked about, I was more successful at work. So I didn't feel like I could even handle being home full time. Although I knew like I was like, getting burnt out trying to balance everything. I didn't feel like I could. And my husband, like I said, he thought he could be it would be better if I just worked full time, and he was stay-at-home dad. And because I was happier at work. So you need to learn to be happy at home, happy with your kids, to enjoy that life, because your husband is not going to support you being a stay-at-home mom if you're just going to be complaining all day while he's the one becoming the sole provider, taking on all that stress, if it's not even really going to be beneficial really for the family. So this is huge, learning how to be content. And then also just your mindset, like you need to learn to get to this point if you're going to be able, like your marriage can still improve, your life can still improve, you can still have a better relationship with your kids, even if you keep working the same amount of hours. Again, ideally, we're talking about we want to get to working less, but in this moment, it's not impossible for things to improve with your current circumstances. Does it take maybe some troubleshooting, figuring out how to simplify your life? How can you fit in self-care? Yes, and I have videos about that, posts about that, and we talk about that in my group, because that is a challenge that we all face. Even as stay-at-home moms, we all have to figure that stuff out. So, step 1, learn to be happy, grateful, and content with your current circumstances, which will serve you well in life in general. Step 2, which kind of flows, and again, this is part of the skills from Laura Doyle, but to cultivate and create a culture of respect and admiration towards your husband. So if your husband feels, that you have all these negative thoughts about him, you're constantly correcting him, showing him how to do things better. Again, he's not going to be like empowered to be your hero and save you from, a life of working outside the home if you don't believe in him, if you are constantly belittling him. And how is he going to feel like, because he most likely is going to have to find a way to make more money, most likely. You need to build him up, and you need to cultivate that admiration from him. And again, you might be struggling with resentment for your current circumstances. So that comes with, again, self-care, first skill. It does flow nicely into this, and Laura Doyle talks about a lot. There's podcasts too. The Empowered Wife can be helpful. You can search for topics, but about what respect looks like. But a big part of the admiration piece was just changing yeah, looking for the good in my husband, seeing the good things that he's doing, not focusing on how I felt like he was failing or messing up or not speaking my love language. I have a video about the love languages. It's a huge one. um, so my husband started to feel more like, okay, like this woman believes in me. She likes me. I can contribute to her happiness. And it's not like we had a terrible marriage all the time. Like we definitely had good moments, but like the underlying tone was definitely like not the most stable foundation in our marriage. He felt like I only focused on what he wasn't doing. He felt like he never really got, credit for what he was doing right. And he started to kind of feel dejected and not as motivated basically to try. Um, I also would interpret a lot of his actions through a negative lens. So once I started to like be more neutral and like more understanding that like I have a video called "It's Not All About You." Like my husband has external stressors and stuff, and he's not everything is he's upset with me. Not everything is like he's not actually that vindictive or malicious. I don't like. I got crazy back then. I'm sure hormones, sleep deprivation all got into there. But I know I started looking at my husband's actions through a much more positive lens and allowing to see how he did love and care for me and just to admire how he worked hard without complaining and all the stuff he did without complaining, which I needed to learn from. So that is